So today we're joined by my former boss. This is Tim Arthur. He's now creative director at Virgin Money, but was previously CEO of Time Out, which is how I know him. And I thought it'd be great to talk to you today, Tim, about content and what makes good content, because obviously that's something that Time Out was really well known for.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope it didn't get worse while I was in charge. No, it was, yeah.
Definitely. So can you tell us a little bit about your career at Time Out? How many years were you there for?
I had 3 periods of time at Time Out, so it's been one of the great loves of my life as a company. I started there when I was 20 as just entering listings, and that was before the internet and before computers were proper, so you can cut and paste, so you'd have to enter everything in manually each week. So I did a couple of years then. Then I went off to do playwriting. Then I came back and edited a section at the front of the magazine for a bit. Then I came back about 9 years ago as the comedy editor, and then took over the digital platforms, started Time Out Live, then took over as editor-in-chief, and then became CEO. So pretty good. So
loads of different roles within the business too, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I think I pretty much did everything. And I started off, I mean, because I'm an old man now, I started off as a print journalist. So in the early days, that was all we did. And actually doing the listings was really interesting, because the listings was this real art form. If people don't know Time Out, it's a listings magazine. It's but you'd have to describe something in 20 words. It was a bit like tweeting, actually. Weirdly enough, it was the kind of discipline you get from tweeting. And there are certain people who are brilliant on Twitter. My wife is brilliant on Twitter. She's one of the 25 funniest people on the planet on Twitter. Just a weird fact.
How did they decide that? Who decides that?
Rolling Stone magazine decided.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing? That is really cool. But the reason I bring that up is she really crafts it. So she doesn't. I mean, she's a comedy writer, but she spends a lot of time on a tweet. It'll be half an hour getting a tweet right, and it's that thing of making sure that every single word matters and every single word counts. You're not throwing anything away. And actually, when I was writing the listings, right at the start of Time Out, you had that same thing. You had to describe a band or a play or a restaurant, anything in 20 words. You have to get really good at cutting and editing and getting stuff to be the tightest, most impactful form. And so that was a lesson that I took with me throughout my life, because then as you write more, you should keep that skill. Every word should matter. And so it doesn't matter if you're writing a 5,000 word article or a novel, actually. That discipline of knowing you've got to make each single word count and be part of the bigger whole, that was really important.
Well, and so one of the ways that obviously with a company like Time Out, as you expand and you've got more and more writers, kind of that continuity of voice is really important, isn't it? I know at Time Out there was a style guide. How important is that style guide for a magazine or for a business?
I think they're important, but only if they're done well. What can happen with the style guide, and it definitely happened at Time Out, with the original style guide, was I think it was like 300 pages long, and actually they just didn't read it, so they never used it. It wasn't really great, I guess, for that reason. If you're going to use a style guide, you should I think you should write it in the style that you want to reflect. It should be written in house voice, not in something separate, and it should be imaginative and short and something people can really dip into. I think most times, though, in reality, at a magazine anyway, house style and the voice of the style really gets dictated by the editor. The editor is the guardian of that, and should be talking to the writers all the time, saying this is the kind of stuff we want, it's this kind of angle, no, we wouldn't use that kind of phrase, actually, that's too colloquial, or that's not colloquial enough, actually we want you to speak in an ordinary language, no, you can't swear in our publication, or in Time Out, we'd like you to swear more. And it's that kind of brand guardianship that's quite important, and even here at Virgin Money, actually, we have somebody who's in charge of our content, and he's really the brand guardian. So he knows the tone of voice, and he sets it, and then constantly reinforces it by the way we look at every single piece of content that we create.
And how important is audience when it comes to finding that brand voice?
Audience is really important. I think both for content and business in general, knowing your audience, knowing who you're pitching at, is absolutely vital, because what a 12-year-old wants, you know, and you use the most extreme example, what a 12-year-old wants is totally different from what an 80-year-old wants, both in the actual nature of the content, how they want it written, and now on what platform they want it to deliver, you know, what delivered by. The 12-year-old is much more likely to want something, you know, on a social media platform, maybe Snapchat, you know, something like that. I don't know what would be the ones that they would want it on, because I'm not that age. And an 8-year-old might still want a printed version, you know. So you make these big things, but I think the more sophisticated the business is, the more sophisticated your segmentation and understanding is of your, you know, your customer group, and that's both the customer group that you currently have, because you need to service them really, really well, but also the customer group that you think you can grow into. If you want to expand, you've got to be able to identify these are the groups that are most likely to be attracted and have affinity for this brand, and by analysing them in as much detail as you can, you then create content or UX experiences or whatever it would be that absolutely suits their needs. And it's really about finding out what do they want and then giving it to them. And then there's a mixture of artistry. So we work quite closely. So I've got content teams and marketing teams with me at Virgin Money, and I had exactly the same at Time Out. And actually it's working between the two. If those two work together really well, then you create, I think, great content, because actually the marketing team can inform the content team. You know, this is what our customers want, this is what they're looking for as well. The brilliant thing about the digital age is you don't have to guess what people are looking for. You can just go to Google, do Google Analytics, you find out these are the most searched for terms, and you create content you know your specific customer segmentation is really looking for. You give that to a content team, and then the key thing for that content team, though, is to still be imaginative and innovative and creative. They've got to create amazing content, which is still artistic, I think, but with one eye on an audience. But you know, but as soon as you try and, I think, write content or create videos or something that is just based on a series of algorithms, you know, you just say, well, it should have this, that, then it sort of loses something, because actually creatives are creative. It's part of the thing. You shouldn't try and hamper that. But then what you do is you create that content that has one eye to it, is also written by great people who are super talented, and then you give it back to a marketing team whose job it is then to amplify it back to that audience, and then it becomes a lovely circle really that goes round and round. But the more you know your audience, and the more you're aware of the audience, I think the better the content becomes. And the brilliant thing with the digital age we live in is that you can find out if your articles have been successful or your videos have been successful. You know how many shares they've got, how many likes they've got. You can tell, you know, how many people have seen it. You can tell how much of the article they watched, how much of the video they watched, and then you should. Then a good content company then learns from that and says, okay, why didn't this one work? Okay, we tweak it. I mean, the other thing is now, if you're in a decent sized company, you can do A/B testing on stuff. Mm-hmm. So you just put two versions of an article up, one with a picture of a dog at the top of it, one with a picture of a small kid at the top of it, and just watch which audience are more attracted to that, and then you swap over.
Well, and you don't even have to be a big company to do that, can you? You can put the same post on social media on 2 different days and just look
absolutely.
At the different
Absolutely.
You can do your own A/B testing.
Absolutely, your own A/B testing. Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the interesting things actually talking to you, because you've obviously come from a background which everyone associates with content, and then you're in a company, you're working for a bank where people might not necessarily think that content would be something that you concentrate on. I mean, people might even wonder why a bank would have a creative director. So it's really interesting, actually, this idea that content underpins so much of what we do. And so there might be people watching who think, well, do you know what? My business has nothing to do with content. I'm not going to be writing much. I'm not going to have a blog. But actually, there's so much content that surrounds your company, whether it's slogans and branding and the way that you behave on social media. There are loads of different ways.
It's all content. Yeah, every communication you do with your audience is content, from brand advertising to a blog to a letter. It's all content. And actually, when it comes down to consistency, we were talking earlier about consistency of voice. They have to be consistent across all your communications. It has to sound like it comes from you, and your company has to know who it is. You know, where do you stand? Are you funny? Are you sincere? Do you want to be trusted? All these kind of attributes that you need to discuss and think about yourself should help create your tone of voice. But then you have to be consistent with it. And when I say consistent, actually, you also have to understand the platforms it's working on. If you're writing for social media, it's very different from a formal communication that you would put into somebody's, I don't know, if it's an invoice or something like that. But even then, there must be something about it which has the same DNA. social media is social by its nature. When it comes into your feed, somebody's invited you in on Facebook, you have to speak to them in a way like a friend. It's a very different way, but actually it still has to have an essence of how you perceive your company and how you want it to go across.
Well, in the Virgin Group are a classic example of that, aren't they? Because, as a company as a whole, it spreads over so many different industries. So to be able to find those threads of continuity and consistency across such diverse fields is amazing.
It is, and Virgin actually have got a fantastic set of brand values called the Virgin Way, which are guidelines. And we were talking about, a book of house style. The way that Virgin approached it is just a series of words. Mm-hmm. So we have things like smart disruption, heartfelt service, red hot, and actually we've got 6 sets of words. And they're more or less your brand guidelines. Mm-hmm. And you create your sort of tone of voice based off those. So it's not... actually what it allows for is you to be creative within a framework which is very distinct, and actually it's a very Virgin way of doing it as well, as opposed to being prohibited to do things or being so limited by a set of really strong guidelines. But it allows each company to talk to their own customers in different ways, because we land differently. I think Virgin Media and Virgin Trains are doing something very different from Virgin Money. We're a bank, we look after people's money, it's a really important part of people's lives. What they don't want from Virgin Money is like a joker. Do you mean you don't want somebody who's going to be cracking jokes all the time, because you go, well, that's not the person I want to look after my money. I want it to be trusted, actually, or you want to know that they're ethical, or you want to know, that they are there to support you throughout your life. And those are the kind of tone bits. Heartfelt service is the bit within our tone that we sort of dial up, I guess, because we genuinely believe in trying to make everyone's life better off. So we do that. But if we can make people smile as well, the Virgin brand gives us a license to do that.
It's interesting. It's almost like you've got sort of 6 rails, and you've got to kind of switch on each one. I'm going to okay, this is a brand related to money. We're going to turn up that trust factor or the heartfelt service, and then actually on one of the other streams, if it's the gym, for example, you're going to there's going to be a different mix of those same components.
I think that's exactly right. I think it allows the brand to land in different places because of that. But again, it goes back, I think, to authenticity and understanding what your brand is and what you stand for and what your purpose is, because it would be wrong of us. So if we say we dialed up heartfelt service, if we made all our communications about that, how much we care about people, but we didn't really care about people, your customers know it instantly. You'll all have seen adverts. There's quite a lot of adverts around at the moment for different banks, which look as if they care a lot about their customers. But actually, if you then look at the products, that's just a veneer. It's something that they think they should do, or they'll spend a lot of time on corporate social responsibility. But it doesn't run through the whole processes. It doesn't run through everything that that their company stands for. Whereas with us, Jane Ann, our CEO, is incredibly inspirational, and she will sit down at meetings and say, okay, well, what's the EBO solution, everyone's better off solution to this problem? What's the business decision we make that will make everyone better off? Rather than what will make us more money, it's what will make it fairer, what will make it a better outcome for both our customers and for us. And so therefore, our voice can be, and I think is, really authentic, because we're not trying to spin anything. It's not the marketing team saying, well, what will go really well with an audience is if we just pretend we're this. Because I think customers are very savvy now. I think they pick up nuances, and I think the companies that you trust, that you think are being themselves. And I think it's the same. I see companies largely like people. People who are comfortable in their skin. People who aren't bullshitting you. They're just telling the truth.
Well, I can think of a classic example of some banking adverts that I remember seeing last year and thinking, these don't ring true. They're trying too hard, and you could see that the angle was particularly. The example I can think of, they used a gay wedding, they used someone in a wheelchair. It was so targeted that, look, we're being really PC and doing this, that it came across really fake, instead of just actually being like, okay, we're showcasing a load of people who bank with us, and one of them happens to be in a wheelchair, and I think it felt forced, and it didn't make me think, oh, I now want to go and bank with that bank. If anything, it's put me off, and whenever I see the ads, I'm a bit like, oh, it kind of jars me.
And I think that's going to happen. I think in any business, it's that thing about authenticity. I've been reading a lot of and watching a lot of Simon Sinek's work at the moment, who talks a lot about purpose and why companies with purpose really win out. And he says companies that know the why. Why do you exist? And that can't be because I want to get rich and I want to have money. There's got to be a bigger purpose. Those companies with a bigger purpose, everything that happens, as long as you know the why you're doing something, then the how you do it and the what you do all fits into place, and it feels authentic and it feels genuine, and actually it works both internally for your company because everyone comes along. I mean, that's interesting when you talk about content. I think of internal communications as well that we do with our company as being content, and they have to be the same voice that we talk to our customers in. If there was a different voice, you'd know there was something that was disjointed. Yeah. But actually, we speak to our colleagues. We've got 3,000 colleagues here at Virgin Money, and in all our internal communications, we speak to them in the same way that we speak to our customers, because that's who we are. We're not trying to be something else, different people.
Well, and I think it's interesting you say that, because I can remember literally the first time I met you and having been in the office for a little while and then someone saying, oh, this is the CEO. And I remember the conversation we had, and the conversation we had was, you definitely swore, you told some rude jokes, but it was very much the tone of Time Out. I mean, like literally it was like reading it, and I was kind of like, oh, I know where I stand. It wasn't, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be this really corporate conversation because he's my CEO, and it's really interesting. I think it's about being genuine and yourself, and that comes across in everything that you do.
Whether and you're passion for it as well. Yeah. I think that's the thing is, like Time Out is a brilliant organisation, and I loved working there, and I wanted that enthusiasm, to come through everything we created. And I think that's another thing about when you create content. Great content comes from a place of passion. If you're asking people to write stuff they don't want to write, or video things they don't want to write, or, that will happen at times, but actually what you've got to do is inspire them to create great work. You've got to try and explain to them why this matters, why creating this is going to change somebody's life, why it's going to be funny, why it's going to move somebody, why it's going to enable somebody's life to be better, and if you can do that, then people create great content. And actually, I think like the skill of a good manager or a good editor is to be able to take a vision and then put that into some kind of narrative structure that can inspire other people to create great work. And then you've got to praise them as well. If they do create great work, you've got to make sure that everyone knows it's great work.
Well, and that passion sort of starts from day one, doesn't it? When your company might not be the size of Time Out or a Virgin Group, when you're literally just you in your own bedroom or on your sofa dreaming up this idea, you're going to need that passion, because there's going to be a lot of legwork that you need to do, and if you don't care enough about it, you're never going to get to the stage where you have got other employees to direct and to praise, because it's just not going to get that far, because you have to care about it.
Yeah, and the great thing I think about that sort of startup culture is you should be building something you want to build. You've got nothing to lose. So the great thing is when you're starting out, you can't damage your brand because you don't have a brand. Do you mean you're creating something? And those are the times I think when people should be most brave. Actually, they should be and most pure and authentic to what they believe, because and really express that through every kind of form of communication they do, and even in their public speaking if they're trying to pitch, because that will come through and that will be infectious. There was a great guy that I saw speaking at South by Southwest who was talking about brands. And he said 30 years ago it took 30 years to establish a brand, 20 years ago it took 20 years, 10 years ago it took 10 years. He said now you can establish a brand overnight. Yeah. And you can, but it's so hard. It's an incredible amount of work, especially if you work in the digital sphere. It's so difficult now to get cut through because there's so many competitors. But you can do it, and the ones that do cut through have a fantastic idea, the product is great, but the founders often are unbelievably charismatic and have such incredible belief in what they're creating that they want everyone to share it. And you can tell that from their communications, and you can tell that from the way they relentlessly push their life and soul into it. And I think that's when something comes through and can come through really, really powerfully.
You have to be your own brand fan, don't you? You can't expect people to be fans of your brand if you're not.
Yeah. You should be a fanatic when it comes to your own work. Because if you're not, nobody else will be. If it bores you, it will bore everybody else. And it's the only way really to attract, either backing particularly, or more importantly, audience. And increasingly in the digital world, digital business, The audience is everything. You know, money will come, actually. If you see a lot of huge digital platforms didn't make money or haven't made money even for years, but actually it's about the size of the audience, and the audience and how you reach the audience and how you speak to that audience to grab them is absolutely key.
And the enthusiasm is infectious, isn't it? Whether you're speaking to that audience or you're then speaking to investors, and if they can see the enthusiasm of your audience, that's going to put you on such a higher pedestal.
Yeah, it does, and also it means that you won't give up. And loads of people that will worry about that, investors will worry about that. If they look at you and you don't look kind of relentlessly enthusiastic, they know all the hurdles that it takes to make a successful business, and not even a big global business. You know, if you're just trying to make money, you know, or a small boutique business, that takes unbelievable dedication and will, and you'll be knocked loads and loads. And what an investor wants, or what your audience wants as well, is to know that you're going to be there, actually, that you're going to keep going, and that's vital, I think.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been amazing.
Charlie's been lovely to see you again. Cool, thanks.